The wind swept the plains with a low, restless hum, carrying the drifting scent of sagebrush and sun-baked dust. Caleb Rourke had grown used to that sound. It was the anthem of the lonely frontier, the lullaby of his quiet life as the lone rancher of the Cimarron Stretch. For 7 long years, the only company he had known was the whisper of the prairie grass, the steady rhythm of his horse's gait, and the creaking solitude of a cabin built too big for one man. The sun was dipping behind the distant buttes, staining the sky a deep orange that bled into purple shadows, when Caleb spotted movement near the dry creek bed. He slowed his horse, narrowing his eyes. He expected a stray cow or maybe a coyote making its rounds. But the figure stumbling through the dust was unmistakably human, small, unsteady, and clearly fighting to stay upright. He rode closer, tension pulling at his muscles. Bandits sometimes used trickery to lure ranchers out of position. But as he neared the figure, he saw a woman, Apache by her clothing and braids, her steps faltering, her breath ragged, her skin streaked with sweat and exhaustion. She tried to lift her head, but her strength was nearly gone. Caleb dismounted, boots crunching in the dry earth. He approached slowly, palms open, showing he meant no harm. She looked at him, eyes dark with pain but fierce with something else, defiance, desperation, or perhaps a lifetime of loneliness. When she finally spoke, her voice cracked like dry timber. "I'm so tired of being without a man," she whispered. The words were not seductive. They weren't even a request. They were a confession carved out of suffering and solitude. Caleb's breath caught, not because of what she said, but because of how broken it sounded. She swayed. He caught her before she hit the ground. Her body was weak, trembling. The moment his arms wrapped around her, she let out a sound that was not quite a sob, more like the exhale of someone who hadn't been held in years. Caleb felt something inside him shift, a part of him waking up that had been dormant since the winter he lost his family. He lifted her onto his horse. Her head rested against his chest as naturally as if it had always belonged there. He felt her breath against him, soft, uneven, desperate for rest. As he rode toward his ranch, the plains stretched endlessly before them, but for the first time in years, Caleb didn't feel alone on the land. When they reached the cabin, he carried her inside. She was half-conscious, fingers gripping the fabric of his shirt as though afraid he might disappear. He laid her gently on his bed, covered her with blankets, set water beside her, and watched her sleep. She slept the entire night, the rise and fall of her chest growing steadier as the hours ticked by. Caleb sat near the fire, sharpening tools he didn't need to sharpen, because his mind kept drifting back to the moment she whispered those broken words into the fading light. At dawn, she woke with a start, eyes darting around the cabin like a cornered animal. When she saw Caleb sitting at the small table, she relaxed, just slightly, just enough to show she had expected far worse. "My name is Tala," she said softly. Over the next hours, she told him pieces of her story. She spoke of renegades, white and native alike, who terrorized small camps across the plains. They took food, horses, anything they desired. And when they came to her people, Tala had refused them. For that, she was hunted, chased from her home, forced to wander alone through the wilderness. She paused, eyes downcast. A woman alone is easy prey. Caleb listened in silence. He never interrupted. Something about her tone, her dignity despite everything, made him feel protective in a way he hadn't felt in years. Tala noticed. The way he watched her, not with hunger, not with judgment, but with a quiet care she wasn't accustomed to. Days passed, and Tala found her place on the ranch with surprising ease. She gathered herbs near the creek, mended torn saddles, and even helped Caleb repair fences. They moved around each other with growing familiarity, silent cooperation that felt like a kind of dance. And every so often, when she looked at him, her gaze lingered in a way that made Caleb's chest tighten. One afternoon, as they patched a section of fence, she finally spoke what had been bubbling beneath the surface. "You don't ask questions," he shrugged. "You'll tell me what you want me to know." She studied him for a long moment. "Most men demand. You, listen." Her voice softened. "I didn't think a man like you existed." It startled Caleb, how much he wanted her to keep talking. Her voice was warm, rich, threaded with strength. When she smiled, rare, gentle, unguarded, it struck him like sunlight breaking through a storm. At night they sat by the fire. Tala wrapped herself in his jacket, though the room was warm. Caleb pretended not to notice that she always pulled it close, breathing in the scent of leather and pine that clung to it. She spoke quietly, sharing fears she had kept locked away for years. "I thought I would die out there," she said one night, staring into the flames. Alone, unseen, unloved. Caleb's hand tightened around his cup. He wanted to reach for her, to hold her, to reassure her, but old wounds made him hesitant. Still, the desire was there, simmering beneath his calm exterior. And Tala sensed it. Their fingers brushed over a shared piece of firewood one evening. A small touch, barely a second, but the jolt it sent through Caleb was undeniable. Tala's breath caught softly, and she didn't pull away. Their eyes met, her dark gaze searching his steady but vulnerable. The air between them changed, not with heat, but with possibility. But the plains never let peace last. On the 6th evening, Tala spotted dust rising beyond the ridge. Her entire body went rigid. Caleb followed her gaze. 6 riders, coming fast. Not travelers, not neighbors, renegades. Tala's hand flew to her mouth. Caleb immediately grabbed his rifle, but she caught his arm, fingers trembling. I should have left, she whispered. I brought danger to your home. Caleb turned to face her. You brought life back into it. The emotion in her eyes nearly broke him. The renegades arrived with arrogant shouts and smug grins. Their leader, a scarred brute with cold eyes, dismounted and demanded Tala. Caleb stepped in front of her without hesitation. She doesn't belong to you. The leader sneered. She belongs to nobody, and that means we take her. Tala grabbed Caleb's sleeve, clinging to him, not in fear alone, but in trust. In choice, Caleb fired a warning shot near the leader's boot. Tension exploded. Chaos erupted. Gunfire lit the dusk. Teresa gripped Caleb's back as he shielded her, guiding her behind the trough, whispering urgently, "Stay with me." "I won't leave you," she answered, breath shaking. They fought side by side. Caleb shooting with deadly precision, Tala throwing rocks to distract horses and disarm men, the cattle dog barking wildly and causing havoc. One renegade fell, two fled, the others scattered. The leader cursed but mounted his horse, pride wounded, rage simmering. This ain't over, but the fight was done. The danger passed. Caleb lowered his rifle, breathing hard. Tala stepped toward him, dust streaking her cheeks, hair wild, eyes glossy with emotions far deeper than fear. "You fought for me," she whispered. Caleb wiped blood from his hand, then reached to brush a lock of hair from her face. "I'd fight 100 men for you." Her breath hitched. Why? Why risk yourself for someone broken? He swallowed, his voice raw. "Because I've been broken too. And you make me feel alive again." Tala's eyes shimmered. She stepped closer, placing her hand gently on his chest. Caleb's heart pounded beneath her palm, strong and steady, as if waking from a long sleep. "You make me feel safe," she whispered. "And you make me feel," he replied, unable to finish the sentence. She tilted her face upward. He bent his head slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. Their lips met, soft, trembling, full of longing and gratitude and years of loneliness bleeding away into warmth. Caleb wrapped an arm around her waist, pulling her closer. Tala slid her hands around his shoulders, pressing herself against him, not with desperation but with trust. The kiss deepened, heat building gently, naturally, like a fire that had been waiting for kindling. Caleb held her face in his hands, tracing the softness of her cheeks with his thumbs. Tala's fingers curled into his shirt, anchoring herself to him, her breath mingling with his in slow, intimate exhalations. When they broke apart, she rested her forehead against his. "I'm not used to belonging anywhere," she murmured. Caleb pressed a soft kiss to her hairline. "You don't belong to me. You belong with me, if you want to." Tala closed her eyes, letting the words sink into the deepest parts of her soul. No one had ever offered her choice. No one had ever offered her tenderness. She slid her arms around his waist and held on. That night, as the stars spread across the sky, Tala and Caleb talked for hours near the fire. She told him about the dreams she'd buried, the wish to feel safe, to be held, to have a home. Caleb shared his grief, his guilt, his years of silence. They didn't hide from each other. They didn't pretend to be unscarred. They simply sat close, shoulders touching, breaths sinking, souls opening. The prairie outside was vast, wild, dangerous, but inside the cabin, for the first time in many years, two lonely hearts found something they thought they'd lost forever. And in the quiet, Caleb reached for Tala's hand. She laced her fingers through his. And they didn't let go. "If you want, I can."